So I am here now with Tiffany Johns, and Tiffany has been playing an interesting role in the Symphony 3 recording, in that you have recorded three different instruments, and not a single one of those instruments were in the original score. Um, so yeah, and the parts were all basically written for you,
Right.
with or edited or revised for you to play them.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine the G trumpet parts were just transposed, and that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
it.
I didn't do anything to those.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about the three instruments that you've played.
Sure.
So you've played all brass instruments, and it's all middle brass, middle
Yeah.
or high brass, and you're not really a high brass player.
No, I'm not.
You're a low brass. So the first thing you did was the. So I have parts in the symphony for three B flat flugelhorns.
Mhm.
Pretty standard instrument. I use flugelhorns all the time. He said, "Hey, can I play the third part on my G flugel?" I said,
This one.
"Yes, yes." So a flugelhorn in the key of G. Um, Actually, let's talk about that instrument since we've got it out. So why
Sure.
don't you tell me a little bit about this particular instrument?
So this is, well, I've owned a lot of really rare brass instruments, and this is probably the rarest one. Well, actually, the soprano is probably more rare because that's only one of a kind. But
Right.
for something actually produced, this is it. Um, it is a Dynasty 3 alto bugle in G, made for drum corps use, but it's from the 70s, which is way before DCI allowed three valves. So it was made for the European market where they could always use three valves. There weren't any of those archaic rules stuck around for a long time.
Right. And I think it's at this point where I probably should address an elephant in the room about something
Uh,
I wrote on my old bandistration website, where I made an off the cuff comment that I've never heard any uh, marching brass instruments being used for musical purposes. Meaning, and I got some flack for that. Ooh, yeah, and part of that is my absolute hatred of marching band,
of course.
but uh, the instruments do have some value, and you've kind of shown that with this instrument. It's actually a really beautiful instrument.
It's awesome. I would describe it, it's a big flugelhorn. It really is. They call it an alto bugle, but it's a big flugelhorn. Sounds best with an alto horn mouthpiece, and it just has the nicest sound. It's very flugel-like,
Mm-hmm.
but when you push it, it's a little more horn-like. Has a little, like, instead of getting, when you really push a flugel, it gets a little trumpet
Yeah,
edge.
it does.
This gets a little horn edge more, so at least I think. But it was made by Wilson for Dynasty, and Wilson's like a Swiss maker that's super high quality and
Right.
respected.
Yeah, they're
So it
well known
plays
for their
really well.
themes.
Exactly, and it plays really nice. Um, yeah, and it's awesome, and it's all but sold. But um,
So, but yeah, it's one of those. And then I think in the part, because it is pitched a little bit lower than the B flat flugel, I did add a couple of the extra low notes in there that
yeah,
wouldn't be available. Now, of course, in the final score, the part would be optional, and you'd have it as available as a third B flat flugel. But for
right.
the recording, it's kind of nice to have it.
Yeah, that's cool. So you
Yeah.
got three different voices in that family.
Yes, so yeah, and so there's also an alto flugel we're using. Although I think what we're actually using is an alto
It's an alto cornet,
cornet. But
which is very related to this thing,
yeah,
as it happens.
at that point you're almost splitting hairs as to what they
Yeah,
are.
but as someone who did own both, this and the instrument that I forget their name, but who recorded
Hmm.
the alto flugel
Brian.
part. Um, this is way darker
Hmm.
than the one in F, than the
Yeah,
alto cornet.
but
So yeah, it's
yeah,
it's a cool instrument.
it is a cool instrument. Have you used it anywhere else?
I have actually, not a lot, but I used it in a session once, for sort of like a soul ballad.
Hmm.
And I was just asked to write the horn parts, which is something that happens a lot. And I originally wrote it for two Flügelhorns on top of a couple trombones, but I decided that I actually thought these might be better because A, the song was in the key of G,
Well,
and
yeah,
B, I was like, well, I think this sound might be a little more interesting, a little more, tiny bit more skewed to the horn
yeah.
spectrum. And it was great. It was awesome. I really enjoyed recording with it. And I've used it in a couple multi-tracks
Hmm.
as like a fourth flugel. Um,
Did you do that in the girls want to have fun?
yeah, it has a couple brief parts, just like
Yeah.
very minor in in one of the mellophonium parts when I needed
Hmm.
a third or a fourth flugel voice.
Yeah. If you have not watched Tiffany's Girls Just Want to Have Fun multi-track, it is, for my money, it's the best brass multi-track I have seen. It is, and it's phenomenal arranging too. Because you're
Well,
a
thanks.
fantastic arranger and composer.
Well,
You'll
thank you.
always be a phenomenal performer. But
And there is a new multi-track coming soon, and
ooh,
this I did record a very minor part on this.
hmm,
Like you probably won't even notice that it's there, but it does make an appearance.
I look forward
Which
to
is
that.
funny because since I'm selling all this stuff off, a couple times, like recently, I was like, wait, I still have to record this instrument on
Oh,
that multi-track
yeah.
before I sell it. Uh-oh! So I like knocked those out real quick.
Yeah. So, but yeah,
So yeah,
that one's been kind of fun, and that one's definitely going to be. It's one in the symphony you're not going to hear very much because it's always an inner voice, so it's always going to be a harmony. So I think at this point I will kind of insert one of your recordings from there, and I'll
sure.
put in a solo version and then a version with. As of right now, I've got Flugel one, Flugel three, which is you, and then alto Flugel. So I'll kind of show how those work together. So let's talk about the next instrument you used,
Hmm.
the the G trumpet,
Yes.
which this is probably like the most marching band instrument you could possibly have.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So in the piece, I've got four offstage trumpet choirs, uh, and they're positioned around the audience. The one on the right and the one on the left are made of six trumpets: piccolo, E flat, three B flats, and bass. Well, Tiffany said, "Hey, why don't I record the lowest B flat part on this G trumpet?" Now, Why don't you tell them a little bit about the G trumpet, what it really is?
So, also made for drum corps use, like the alto bugle, and just like that, they decided to call it a bugle, even though it isn't really.
Right. It
But it's in
has.
G, so it's a bugle, right?
Right. Yeah. That was the only defining characteristic of the drum chorus. It's a G. It's a bugle.
Yeah. So this one is a soprano bugle, whereas the last one was the alto bugle. This one has three valves.
And they're both in the same pitch.
Yes,
They're
same
both
exact pitch.
transposed down a fourth.
Yep. And this is way, 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 way more common than that alto bugle. This
Hmm.
is like, these are a dime a dozen, because they made a million of them. And also a dynasty though, good player. But basically what it is, even though it's called a soprano bugle, is a trumpet in G with a really big throat in the bell. And
And
that's it.
that makes it a lot louder.
Yeah, yes, yes it does. So
That look.
yeah, it's a cool instrument. I've used it a few times now for the lowest trumpet part on my own stuff as well as on your symphony, and it's
Mm-hmm.
always nice for that, especially now that I have a nice big Shilky 24 for it, which I did not have when I recorded the symphony part.
What's the difference between the mouthpiece you used and this one?
So on the symphony on the recording, I used just my normal trumpet mouthpiece, which is
Mm-hmm.
still fairly large because I'm a trombone player, about like a 1 1/4 C sized.
Right.
This is a Shilky 24, which is a massive trumpet mouthpiece. It's gigantic. It's like way bigger than any other pretty much production trumpet mouthpiece. And
Mm-hmm.
so people don't really use it on normal trumpet because it just makes it a laborious task to play.
Right. Almost more like a more toward an alto trumpet mouthpiece.
It's like in between a normal trumpet mouthpiece and my alto trumpet mouthpiece. Somewhere in between there. And so I was like, well, that would be perfect for this thing because this is somewhere in between a normal trumpet and an alto
Yeah.
trumpet.
One
And
thing.
it works great.
Yeah. One thing I noticed in your tracks is how bright it is, and that's I think a product of its DCI origins.
Yeah, and being meant for outdoor use. I will say this mouthpiece tames that quite a bit.
Hmm.
It's not as laser bright as those recordings are. But yeah, I mean, it's always gonna be, at least this model, it's not gonna be the most refined instrument ever, but it's good enough that if you have a good player who can control it, it really is a good low G trumpet.
Yeah. I know you've got a video out there where you talk about how to use the instrument as like that really low trumpet stuff that
Yeah,
goes below the range of the modern B flat trumpet.
yeah, exactly.
Stuff like the cornet solo from Carmen, the
Yeah,
low E flats and Heldenleben,
yeah, exactly.
which
Which
work
it
really well on
does
here.
great. Yeah, does those things very, very well. And actually, in that sense, for Heldenleben, it's like you almost kind of want that brighter
Oh
sound.
God, yeah, yeah.
So it's
It's
great.
almost closer to the old um, long F trombos
Right.
in
I mean,
some
it's still
regards,
pretty far removed, but yeah, it's a
but
little more trending that way.
yeah, it's I mean it's definitely a much more modern instrument, probably much bigger bore.
Oh, yeah, it's huge.
Yeah,
Which is one of the reasons I like it, because
yeah.
I'm a trombone player.
Mm-hmm. You want to play a
Sure.
little bit of it, and we'll see what it sounds like. Yeah, what I find interesting is it really shines in the low notes, but this thing is designed to be a screamer.
Oh, and it can.
Yeah, yeah.
It can.
So like all the old DCI performance you hear with the trumpet screaming up high, it's on one of these. It's
Yep.
actually a minor third below the modern B flat trumpet.
Yeah, and in many ways, especially those older ones with two valves,
Mm-hmm.
um, they
That's what they
scream
had to
better
do.
than Yeah, and they scream better than most B flat trumpets. Like they're the high range, even on this thing with three valves, is it's not it shouldn't be as good as it is for how low the instrument is.
I wonder if some of that is just because the larger the instrument, the more harmonics you have available.
Yeah, I mean it definitely could be, and I think the other thing is it was made to be super free blowing
Hmm.
and loud, so
So they
the
didn't
X
just take trumpet parts and add on extra tubing.
right.
It's
And like
designed to be that way.
there are B flat trumpets that have dimensions as large as this, but they're not common, and
Hmm.
most of them are marching trumpets.
Right.
Um, so yeah, like even though it is basically just a G trumpet with a big throat, it is all original parts. It's not like the contra bugles that are just B flat tubas with some tubing added,
Yeah. Right.
you know.
They didn't.
So in that sense, it's kind of one of the more interesting G bugles because it's actually like not just throwing some more tubing on a B flat.
Right. That and I think like your alto bugles are like that.
Yeah,
They're designed ground up.
yep,
But once you get to the baritone, euphonium, and the contras, those are just B flaps with added tubing, right?
pretty much, yeah. I have a baritone bugle as well, and is it cool? Yes. Is it useful? No,
No,
it's not. Not even slightly.
not one of those you can take reconfigure into like an upright, add a fourth valve, and make it
No, no, I mean, it's very cool, but
nothing you can
it's,
make into a useful instrument, really.
yeah, the most useful bugles, I think, are these two, a soprano and an alto,
Hmm.
if you can get your
I
hands
tend
on
to
an
agree
alto.
with you because I talk about them in my book, and interestingly, they're not all grouped together because you've got a trumpet, you've got
Yeah,
everything else, which really kind of falls into tuba category.
yep.
The true bugles like the alto, the contra, the euphonium, uh, and I basically say like the G alto is probably the most useful. That and the F alto that Kanstel made up until they closed just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it wasn't on their website for the last few years. They only had the F mellophone on the website for a while,
Mm-hmm.
but it was on their website for a long time, and yeah, they made them. I've
Yeah,
never seen one ever,
that's
but
what I actually talked to Jack Kanstel about it once, and he said the only difference between the mellophone and the alto was the size of the bell.
yeah, and you can tell even on the website, like the pictures between
Mm-hmm.
the G alto and the G mellow, or on the old website, the F alto and the F mellow. It's like the same picture. It
Yeah,
just has a bigger flare.
yeah, exactly.
But that difference in flare makes such a difference in sound. It's crazy.
Right.
Because
It
like,
goes from this big wide sound to something a little more refined.
yeah, well, and but also at the same time more trumpet like,
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
is weird. Well, unless you have something like this. Like this is the it's like a much older style of alto bugle, which is best with an alto horn mouthpiece. And it's just a big Flügelhorn. Whereas the Canstool, which I had until recently, it does not work with an alto horn mouthpiece because it's way too flat when you put that in.
Yeah, that's right. Because it
So you
needs.
have to use just a mellophone mouthpiece, which is what I was designed for. And when you do that, it's a cool sound. It's not a bad sound. I had so much fun just noodling around on that instrument. But it's it's obviously much more focused than a mellophone,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more trumpet-like too, with it, at
I
least with
wonder
that
if that's one
mouthpiece.
you could cut down so that you
See, I thought
could.
about that, but that specific horn had no room. Like the main
Oh,
tuning slide was this long. So it was like, well, I
well,
loved that instrument, but that one I also got rid of recently because I was just like, and I'm gonna miss it. I already miss it a lot because I really, really loved it, but it's just like, I'm not gonna use this. I'm just not.
yeah,
Like, there's no way, I can't even think of a use for it in my multi-tracks. Like, I want my mellophone section and my trumpet section, and I don't really need something that bridges the gap. I don't.
yeah. I can see that. And you've become a huge proponent of using the mellophone outside of marching band work, which is
100%.
really unusual. Um, because it is an instrument that is pretty much designed exclusively for marching band.
Yep.
and
It
has
just, it
no
certainly was
roll outside of
originally.
it. Um, that would be something we could talk about further, maybe even in another video. It's like, what role could you see, or let's just talk about it now.
Let's talk about it
What
now.
role
I'm
do
here.
you what role do you see a mellophone being used in more concert works?
So, I don't know why I was reaching for this. I just always like reaching for an instrument. Um, so I've used it for so many things. Now, granted, I mostly use my mellophonium,
Mm-hmm.
which is not the same, but very close. It's bigger. It has a bigger bore,
Mm-hmm.
and a bigger, deeper mouthpiece. So it has a darker sound, but it's very related. You know, it's you could use one, you can use the other. Um, I have used it in so many things. I currently in Los Angeles, I play in a group that the band leader who writes all the arrangements like specifically asks for mellophonium because he really loves the sound in a small horn section. Like it's usually me, trumpet, clarinet, and saxophone in front of a rhythm section. And he loves it because it can kind of work as, well, a mellophone, its own sound, a sort of a substitute flugelhorn, and sort of a substitute trombone, all at the same time.
And you can kind of slide in as a second trumpet.
Yes, exactly. It's pretty versatile in that regard, despite also not blending with anything at all.
Yeah,
It does blend well with Flügelhorn underneath it,
yeah,
but
yeah,
that's not
because
something
they
that
they are very
happens.
related to one another.
Yeah, and
Flugelhorn.
actually, there was a recent gig I did where we had a new arrangement where the trumpet player switched to flugel, and we did a bunch of things in unison, and it was a great sound. It sort of hinted at like a big horn section sound, even though it was just
Right,
two of
right.
us.
There was a time, probably about a month ago, when somebody nearly talked me into adding a mellophone section to Symphony 3. It's like, no, I got to stop somewhere.
Yeah,
But
and you, it's one of those instruments that I feel like you should only add it if you really have an idea for how you want to use it because
right.
it is very distinctive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I can blend with a couple things, but in general, you're gonna hear it.
Right. It's
Like
one of
I've
the
used it.
oh
Go ahead.
yeah, the alto flugelhorn part in Symphony 3. I had in mind that it could be done by a
Yeah, and it certainly could be played, especially on a mellophonium,
mellophone. Mm-hmm.
but probably on a marching mellophone too, especially with the tenor horn mouthpiece. I learned quickly once I got my Yamaha marching mellophone that if I put one of my alto horn mouthpieces in it, it had great sort of almost alto tuba-ish sound.
And
But
alto
you,
tuba is what we're both wanting.
yes, that's a whole different discussion.
Yes.
But yeah, like I have played mellophonium in Latin jazz ensembles. Um, you only when I write the arrangements, but like you can have it like on a section of four trombones and five saxes in like a Latin jazz big band. The mellophonium mellophone can play with either of them super well, or
Yeah.
with the trumpets. And the crazy thing is too, it can be a solo instrument in those styles so well because it is a marching instrument, so it's really loud. And so you can cut over an entire big band easily with one of those. And of course, that's why Stan Kenton liked him.
Yeah. Yeah. He had a section of four, right?
Yep, from 60 to 63. And the rest of the band hated them.
Yeah, because they're a bitch to tune.
Yeah, well, yeah, specifically with the mellophonium, it is not a good design. I love it? Yes. Is it one of my desert island horns? Yes, but that's because I've spent many years learning how to play it in tune. Because it does not happen by itself. But yeah, like I've used s- a flavor of mellophone or mellophonium in recording sessions in a horn section like, but yeah, it works great in the middle of a horn section, bridging flugels and trombones. And most of the time I use it in funk bands, and I use it as a solo instrument, of course. And I'm just like, I feel like more people who are interested in anything alto brass, whether they're horn players or trumpet players.
So I think we need to talk about the last instrument you played on
We
the
do.
recording, and that's one that you just sent in. Oh my god, I forgot how small it is.
It's tiny.
Yeah. I don't think I ever saw pictures of the soprano trombone next to anything for scale. Because
Yeah.
this feels smaller than normal. Or maybe it's just because there's a valve
It's
on it that
well, and here's the
oh,
this in many ways this is bigger than normal soprano trombones because the slide is wider and the bend on the bell is significantly wider. So like a lot of them, the bell will be
mhm.
like a lot closer to the slide, but that means it'll also go out a lot further
Right. And it's I
to
think it's the
compensate.
proportions of this one that just feel a little
Yeah,
odd. Because
it looks
this is
it
a one
looks
of a kind instrument.
yes, one of a kind, handmade in Germany, unmarked, probably as far as Max Tyne can surmise, a exam instrument made by a German brass making apprentice, which is like a standard part of becoming a brass maker is you at certain levels you have to do things to prove your skill and eventually one of like the last ones is to make a complete instrument from scratch. So like this is all from scratch. As far as I know, there are no pre-existing part. I mean, you probably bought the valve from something, but
Yeah.
otherwise it's just this,
And
and this is
that's
the only
not
one.
something you see happen in the US ever.
No, no, that's an entirely maybe European, but at least German tradition.
I think it's much more German than anything.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a cool tradition. I love it.
Oh yeah.
So this particular one is very special as far as soprano trombones go, but in general, trombone in high B flat, an octave above the tenor trombone, so the same as a trumpet, normal B flat trumpet, and it has the bell krantz on it, which is the
Oh
coolest
yeah.
thing ever.
And
It's got a
then you've
leather
got your valve,
strap.
which is a
To,
very German.
it's old school German,
It's
yeah.
old school German. You don't see that a lot. Well,
No, they don't really do that anymore either, but
and
and
then
yeah, this
what's the
I right now I
valve
have
pitched
the
in?
right now it's an F. But you can put it in A flat, G, or G flat. Yeah, it's got different slides, and like it's three other slides, but the G valve pulls to G flat. So it's really A flat, G, and F are the four options. I haven't actually tried to see if this pulls to E. It does have a pull. Um, I just put the F slide in it again because A, it's the coolest looking one, and I'm selling it. So might as well put the biggest one in there so it has the most room in the case. But I always used it with the G valve pulled to a sharp G flat so that it would match my bass trombone second valve tuning.
Okay,
And so that's how I used it. That's how I recorded all the symphony parts was the valve in G
and
flat.
I have to say, I went through all of those in the last couple days, and my God, your intonation is good. It's
Oh,
one of those.
thanks.
It's like everything was within like 10 cents.
Yeah,
I think I had to pull one note, and
yeah,
it's one of those. I don't think there's much context in the scoring, and so
sure.
it was probably a little hard to hear. But my God, the intonation was good, and that's not something I was expecting from soprano trombone. It was one of the reasons I was hesitant to use it.
Yeah. Well, it's not easy. I mean, the
Oh no,
slide
I
positions
don't doubt it.
are small and a tiny little adjustment will uh will change everything. But I got the hang of it pretty well. Like the first time I was like, okay, let's record this, and I did like the first lick, which I forget what it is. Like, I think it starts with a or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Um, like no note was even close, and I was like, okay, let's take a little time here and figure out where these notes are. But then once I
right.
figured out like one lick, it was just like, oh, okay, got it,
Mhm.
and then it was fine from there.
Yeah, so why don't you play a little bit for us? We'll see how well
Yeah.
that comes to the mic.
I'm used to having the valve in G flat. I'm like,
Yeah,
hey, it's
yeah.
an F. It's
But
an F.
yeah, it's a lovely little sound. It's great for
It is.
jazz, isn't it?
Yeah, and well, I was using an American alto horn mouthpiece on this, which is the best thing I found overall for sound and
Hmm.
playability.
You're not the first person I've heard to use an alto horn mouthpiece on soprano trombone.
Yeah, I mean, there's not too many end results, but
Yeah.
the other thing you can do, especially for jazz, is to use a marching mellophone mouthpiece, which gives you a brighter, but
Hmm.
still trombone, but like jazz small bore trombone kind of sound. So it
Yeah,
works.
I definitely like the first one better. It's much more mellow.
So I remember there were a couple times when I was recording the parts, especially the lower register stuff.
Hmm.
Um, like I remember the one with the low Fs. I
Yeah,
forget the exact notes, but like
it's
the
in track 16, part 7.
or whatever it is, and then the F valve or whatever it was. And I remember listening back to it, and I was like, you could not mistake that for anything but a trombone.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the sound is so much beefier than a trumpet in the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
pitch.
exactly. It's very much a trombone sound. And,
Yeah.
and it's going to be interesting to hear it in within the full context of 8 trombones.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
very interested.
yeah. Uh,
There you go.
why don't you talk about some of the stuff you're doing?
Just in general.
Yeah, just in general, like what kind of groups you're playing with.
So the big thing is I play at Disneyland now. Um, on bass trombone, which is my actual instrument, which has been amazing because now I get to actually play bass trombone regularly again. Because, at the end of the day, I love playing small tenor trombone. And there are a lot of small tenor trombone gigs, so I play that a lot. But it's nice to play the big horn again.
To get your low
Um,
notes in there.
yeah, exactly. Plus, that's just home base,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good to be able to
I,
return to that regularly.
it's like after playing so many saxophone gigs, I just want to come back to bassoon. It
Yeah,
just
it's
it
the
feels
same thing.
natural. Yeah.
It's like, do I enjoy all the other gigs? Yeah, of course. I love playing mellophonium whenever I get the chance. I'll play, I haven't played French horn on a gig in a while, but I love that too. I love playing less as much, but still I enjoy playing trumpet, and I do that a lot because it's trumpet.
Hmm.
Um, but it's really nice to come back to bass trombone. Now, granted, what it would be really nice to come back to is euphonium, but
Yeah,
there
is
aren't
euphonium
euphonium gigs.
more your actual primary, or is it bass trombone?
Euphonium is what I started on. And my undergrad degree was both bass trombone and euphonium. And in a perfect world, euphonium would still be, the thing that left the house the most, but there just aren't
You
euphonium
don't see
gigs.
a lot of euphonium gigs.
Yeah, and so even though I wish euphonium was still my main instrument, it really isn't anymore. Like
Yeah.
I can still play it, you know, if LA Phil called me tomorrow to play the planets, I would be like, yeah, of course, I can do that.